Welcome back, everybody.
Hey,
I'm Jamie.
I'm Justina.
And this is
Just So You Know.
We got a really exciting podcast planned for you guys today. But before we get into things, what the hell is up with you?
What is up with me? Well, I'm really full right now, and I can't get like this little TikTok song out of my head that we did. I just want to say that Jamie is like the best partner ever because she entertains all my crazy ass ideas. I'm like, I have an idea, and she's like, brilliant, let's go. So
Let's do it.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm living my best little TikTok life now with you.
My partner in crime, my soulmate, my podcaster. I just love you.
Yeah.
People are like, okay, enough of this. This is
right.
So okay. Anyway.
Jamie's actually in my phone as Jamie, my partner, and people get jealous about that. Not gonna say who.
So today has been a very interesting day. The reason we're both dressed as Mormons is because we were in court earlier.
Yes.
Which went pretty well.
It went well. I mean, it was the first time that I showed up early and everybody else was lagging. I was like, wow, this is different.
It was the first time I couldn't get a freaking cab or an Uber. It said 15-minute wait. I was like, I need to be in the courthouse in 15 minutes. What the hell? Where are the Ubers?
I know, so weird, but I managed to be there on time. I don't know. And I live all the way in the Bronx. Go figure.
Yeah, but it went well. I think the judge, she actually was appreciative of our protest or our installation against the dairy industry.
Art piece, you know, it's getting confusing. What is this thing that we did? Art piece, our installation, protest, but everything went well.
Yeah.
I think the judge was almost embarrassed that she was given our case because we shouldn't have been arrested from the first part.
Yeah, and the judge was like, you know, I got problems with dairy too.
Yeah, she was like, actually, and I'm like, well, don't even start this conversation because women of color, well, people of color in general, have an issue with dairy because we're not supposed to be having it. Anyway.
Like, most people do. Anyway, but that's what's kind of going on. And then just to kind of give you a summary of just my weekend, I have been yelling at fur hags in New York all weekend, and that's why my voice is kind of running low.
You're like, anyway, about my weekend, I was yelling at fur hags. That's why my voice sounds like this. But proud of you. Your pictures were freaking dope. Shout out to Raul, who has been capturing such beautiful, epic moments in this whole movement, and you've just bringing out your other talent, which is modeling. Jamie's a model.
Oh God, I don't know about that. I got blood being poured over my head.
And she does it
Vogue.
ever so nicely. I'm like, damn, girl.
Thank you.
Can I look that hot with blood being poured all over me?
Moral of the story here, guys, is you too can go out on the street and do some activism, and then you can get a raspy little voice like me.
I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about the Iditarod, is what I like to call it.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's called the Iditarod, but it's basically dog sledding.
Okay, that makes more sense because when I saw Iditarod, I was like, I don't know what?
Yeah. It's kind of strange. It's these people taking journeys with a pack of dogs across Alaska, traveling, over 1,000 miles, and
which was my dream. That was one of my dreams when I was younger. I used to want to be in the snow, in a snowstorm with little dogs chasing down the path. I'm like, go Shiva, go Roster, like a whole little Santa Claus reindeer thing.
What are you talking about?
I thought that was like being one with the dogs at one point.
Okay.
At one point.
Well, today I'm going to change your mind about that.
I bet you freaking will.
Absolutely. So, that being said, I didn't really know much about this topic either because unlike food, something that we do 3 times a day, we eat food every day. I look into kind of the industries that abuse animals in that sense, but when it comes to dog sledding in New York City, it's not ever something that comes up in my little circle.
Right. People think that the dogs have fun and it's like a part of what they do, and like of course they take care of the dogs. Like who doesn't take care of dogs? Like that was my perspective.
Totally. I mean, most people love dogs.
Right.
What are a few facts that you know about dog sledding or about the Iditarod in general?
I know that it's a big tourist attraction for very snowy areas. Like most people have it, like I said, like have this idea that like if I'm in a snowy, cold environment and there's dog sledding, it's a must do. You know? So I know it's a tourist attraction.
The first time I had ever seen it, I had a friend that went to Alaska and I saw she posted these pictures on Facebook and it was her and another friend in this sled and there were these huskies, dogs pulling them on the sled and she was like, yeah, she was like, her hand was in the air and I mean, it looked like adventurous, I guess.
Right.
But I didn't realize what actually encompasses that.
Right. I remember watching, there's been a couple of movies growing up that I've seen dog sledding. And when you watch, it might have been Snow Dogs or it might have been another movie. I can't remember. But it's usually very like horrific and eventful. Like these dogs are like in like really, really life or death situations, like going through cliffs and tossing the movement with the whole little sled with the humans.
Well, it's funny that you
corners.
remember Snow Dogs. You remember the name because I remember Variety actually. They said it was They said it was instantly forgettable. Is how Variety actually.
I loved that movie.
Snow Dogs.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's like one of those things where it's
a heroic movie. I think the dogs basically help the guy. I'm pretty sure it's Cooper Gooding Jr. I could be wrong.
Well, it's the problem with the movie is it's a wildly inaccurate depiction of dog sledding.
Right.
They're not showing what actually goes on.
Well, it's not a movie about that, so it makes sense.
Right. So my second fact is that there was an event here on the East Coast in New York, and it was actually called the Iditarod.
That's where you got it. So Jamie's not that original. She stole that name.
Please, I would have come up with that if they hadn't, okay?
That's true.
Please.
That's true.
Iditarod. And the Iditarod reached out to the Iditarod people and they sent a cease and desist letter and they were like, you got to change the name. We hate it. And so they ended up changing the name. And just to be clear, the Iditarod is nothing like dog sledding. They use shopping carts and it's very different from using dogs and dog sledding, but they were doing a spoof off of the Iditarod.
Okay, so Iditarod is what is Iditarod?
The Iditarod uses dogs, and they use dogs to travel on an extended trip up to 2 weeks.
Is that a company? Like, what is Iditarod?
It's a race. It is one of the longest, cruelest races to exist. And today I'm going to tell you guys about how it started, how it formed, and why we need to learn more about it and try to stop this from happening. Yeah.
Okay.
So what else do you know about dog sledding?
Dog sledding, I know. I feel like I've seen a video of PETA showing how like the dogs are in like really freezing cold temperatures. So I know like maybe it's not the best for the dogs, I think.
Okay, that's a good one. I know that the United States bought Alaska from Russia in 1867.
Whoa.
For $7.2 million. That's a pretty good deal.
You have $7.3 million? You're like, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, Alaska's really big. So, yeah. It's a good deal.
I mean, people buy houses for that amount of money.
That's true.
And the United States bought Alaska for that money.
They were like, Trump change, here you go.
Yeah, here you go. So that's my fact.
Another fact about dog sledding. I feel like there's just like a ton of like novels about dog sledding. Isn't like White Fang about dog sledding?
I personally haven't read many books about it, but I believe you.
Well, in like it, I feel like there's a lot of like not about the issue, but like making it like this like fantastical, if that's a word, like a fantasy story.
Fantastical.
Okay.
I know that ranch dressing was invented in Alaska.
Wait, girl.
Where are you going?
You said about dog sledding. Now you're talking about what do I know about Alaska? What? I know Nancy Poland. What's her name? Is her name?
Excuse me.
Nancy Poland.
Nancy Poland.
Nancy Poland lives in Alaska.
What do we know?
I don't know. I know that Alaska is not for me.
Before you rudely interrupted me, I wanted to say more about ranch dressing. You You can veganize it very easily. It's just a little garlic powder, salt, pepper. Normally they make it from buttermilk, which is disgusting, but just make it with oils and you'll be fine. Vegan mayo. Veganese. Vegan.
Veganese.
Perfect. Okay. Next fact.
It's different from dog sledding, right?
Let's get into it.
Okay, yeah. Tell me all about it.
It is a dog sled race, and it involves human drivers. They call them mushers.
Right. Mush.
It's
Yeah.
a really weird name to begin with. I'm like, who wants to be a musher? Anyway.
They do, apparently.
These mushers are pulled through the Alaskan wilderness by up to 16 dogs. They oftentimes will use Alaskan Huskies, Malamutes, other breeds that have thick fur and that can withstand some of these temperatures. And they take a journey up to about 1,000 miles, a little over 1,000 miles. And they are running through temperatures spanning from 50 degrees to below 50 degrees.
Oh, no.
And
they should not walk all those 1,000 miles
just to see
bring you
down.
Mushers. Okay, sorry, that was really bad.
Anyway.
Okay.
It's a life of suffering. You know, I think about me being out in the cold just for a few minutes. And although I don't have that thick fur, I definitely, even if I did, wouldn't want like the wind coming in my face.
No, I'm sick of people whenever they're like, oh, their fur, they're good. I'm like, no, they're not. It's not that. They don't have blubber like some animals do for freezing temperatures. They're definitely still cold.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
And how about it running like that in the cold air? It's really tough on your lungs.
Yeah.
And a lot of these dogs, the most amount of them die because of they throw up and they choke themselves, and with the air going into their lungs, they can't breathe. That's how they die. Here's a really interesting fact. The Iditarod rules themselves say that dogs cannot be taken inside shelters except for like race veterans. Like they're not allowed that at all unless they need medical treatment.
Oh, no.
And certain Iditarod sledders, the mushers, were actually punished for taking some of their dogs inside.
That's crazy.
So they actually felt bad for their dogs. They took the dogs inside to give them some protection from the elements, and then they were punished.
Punished like how? Like what was their punishment?
We're gonna have a guest on in a little bit that can maybe explain a little bit more about that, but either disqualified or So not only is this they call it a sport, but it's a sport or journey that lasts about 2 weeks. 10 days to 2 weeks.
Non-stop?
So they're allowed certain breaks. They go to rest stops, and the mushers, they say on average, sleep for about 2 hours. So you have these extremely tired people that sometimes hallucinate on the trail. And these dogs that, you know, they'll feed them at the rest stops, I guess let them rest for an hour or two, and then they have to go back out on the road and run. Because the ultimate goal of this is you're trying to race other dogs. You're trying to get to the end point the fast as you can.
Horrible. So the ones who are actually doing all the work get at the minimum 2 hours of sleep.
So they can go to the rest stops. I mean, the mushers, from what I've read online, you know, to show both sides here, is they say that they'll do whatever it takes to give the dogs the most amount of rest that they need. But you and I both know that they're not giving the dogs 8-hour rests and letting them rehabilitate.
Right.
And this is
and what if they have to pee or poop while they're running? They just have to do it while running and like, on themselves?
I didn't
think about that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, hello.
Is
like,
the poop just like flying out the back into the musher's face?
Yeah, they have to pee and poop on themselves. Like,
they deserve it.
Does a dog go say, fuck this, and just like stops? Like, dogs are, I mean, animals in general are very like, you know, they obviously have a spirit, even if they're trying to break it. I wonder, like, what do they do to keep the dogs from rebelling?
So,
right? Like, if you're tired, if I'm, like, on this journey and they're, like, 2 hours of sleep and I'm sleeping and I'm beyond exhausted, I don't give a shit if I have to wake up. I'm going to give some resistance, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really contradictory, right? Because there's Iditarod rule books that say there will be no cruel or inhumane treatment of dogs, and that, any inhumane treatment will not be tolerated. But then again, it's like having them run that race is kind of cruel and inhumane. So it's like you're kind of contradicting yourself.
And not bringing them inside, letting them be outside in the freezing cold.
Right. Dog deaths during this event are pretty much unpreventable. As I said in the beginning of this episode, they lose a lot of dogs along the way. And over its entire span of racing, there's been 150 reported dog deaths. However, they're only reporting some of them that are actually during the race. They don't report the deaths that then happen after. They sometimes don't even report the ones that happen leading up to it. Or
I can really only imagine the shit that they do.
It's sketchy. Yeah. And so it's really sad. I mean, there have been dog deaths that come from various things. A few have been, one was struck by a snowmobile, another hit by a car, one was buried alive in the snow, some of them have heart attacks, and then as I was saying, the excessive fluid in the lungs, they call it the throwing up, the death from throwing up is called acute aspiration pneumonia, so that's caused by choking on vomit.
Oh, that's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is definitely not public knowledge.
No.
At least I don't think so. So this is something that people watch?
Mm-hmm. So then people will watch it, and then they
on
also
TV
travel. I think they can. And mushers, they're known for routinely abandoning their dogs, shooting them, bludgeoning them, or drowning them if they don't run fast enough.
Okay, that was my question. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and the temperatures, I was watching a few videos on this, and I saw a few doggies that were in this blizzard. I mean, picture you're in the Alaskan wilderness.
You don't see anything.
You're running into moose. You're running into, all these crazy things. And the temperatures and then the blizzards. And there was this one video where these dogs actually had their eyes shut from the ice that was glazed over their eyeballs. They were shivering. They died, I'm sure.
Why do they keep doing that? What is the musher proving? Because they're not doing anything.
So it kind of ties back to, why does this race happen? How did it start?
Yeah.
What's the history of it? And when we look at what are these mushers getting out of this, is it the thrill of it? I mean, it sounds horrific. You're on a sled for 10 days and you barely sleep, and what's the prize at the end is really the question. Can you take a guess how much first place winners can get?
Well, I learned that the matadors could get $100K
for bullfighting.
So I can only imagine this is probably more, since it's a longer. Oh no, you're scaring me. How much? 300K?
Okay, let's pushing it a little bit.
Okay.
50K. But
50K.
One race, they're getting 50K. That's somebody's yearly salary.
Right, 100%.
So they're like, oh, well, I'm going to race these dogs for the 50K. It's like, it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, that's just abuse.
Like, they don't love it enough where if they didn't get money in the end of it, I doubt they would do it.
Right. It's not something that it sounds, there's some crazy people out there that like to abuse themselves and be like, I did this, congratulations, but they don't do anything.
Yeah. And
there's no point of this.
So I was reading about this, and it's that some of these mushers, will stay awake for 3 days straight. I'm like, if I don't get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I'm a monster.
Me right now, my eyes are closing. I'm like, I'm exhausted.
So yeah, I mean, look, thousands of these dogs are bred each year for dog sledding, and some of these quotes just from these sled owners, they're like, this is how you know that I'm like, do you really love animals?
Right.
Because here's what we have reports of you guys saying. Hike up. It's my quit your screwing around, you miserable excuse of a fur-covered garbage disposal before I whack your worthless hiney so hard you will need 2 stamps to send it back a poster card.
Wow.
What?
Sounds like my old drama teacher from high school.
It's like a whole monologue.
Like, what the heck? No, he's very, very abusive, and that's very abusive, and just highly abusive.
There's no need to smack anyone's hiney.
And why are you talking about their hiney?
Unless it's requested.
Relax. But what the freak? What a weirdo.
Okay, another one says, when he doesn't respond, stop, go up to the dog, pull back on his tug line, and with a pre-selected willow stick about ½ inch in diameter and 3 feet long, give him a good whack on the butt. Whacking heinies again. You have to whack him good too. Don't just hit the tug line or something. If you're going to bother with this, it's gotta sting. Well, they actually see them as
Objects.
yeah, objects and money at the end of the day. I mean, this guy goes, remember, you're not collecting pets here. You're assembling a team of top athletes.
Whoa.
It's like, calm down. You are not as cool as you think you are.
Yeah, I don't like this.
Yeah, you're actually atrocious. Okay, and then another quote I got is, this is when some of them are declawed without any painkillers, apparently.
No.
He goes, I use a large toenail clipper and just cut them off. Then you will see a soft bone in there. It's really just a little nub. You just got to get that out of there or else it'll grow back in one form or another. Get out of here with that.
Why would they want to declaw them?
I have no idea.
They're going to be scratching up your furniture. They're not cats and they're not going inside. So what the heck?
So dog sledding and dog racing in Alaska, it formally began in 1908. And it was when sled dog owners in Nome, Alaska, held the first All-Alaska Sweepstakes, a 408-mile race is what happened with the dog sledding. And there was also times where I think they were doing this as a means to transport certain medicines. So in 1925, there was a diphtheria outbreak, which is like a bacteria. Okay. And they used dog sleds to get the emergency medical supplies over to the people that needed it.
Right. And then we got bored and just use animals for our entertainment.
And then Dorothy and Joe, they call them the father and mother of the Iditarod, organized a dog sled race. This is in 1967. And the first Iditarod was held, and it was 58 mooshers competed in this. Wow. And yeah, and then you see over time it becomes what it is today. And over the years, many dogs have been injured and have suffered in these horrible conditions. And I think you look at some of these things and it's like, okay, in Alaska, in parts of Canada, in Colorado, it also happens. Right. It becomes like a cultural or traditional thing. And depending on where our audience is from listening, I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking, well, I don't have dog sledding here where I live, or but when you're in these little pockets of Alaska or Colorado or Canada, you run into these communities that it's very prevalent. They do it as a sport. Well, now we're gonna have our wonderful patient guest we've been blabbering on for a while. Michelle is going to come on. She's actually in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she has been working on this issue for years and is gonna tell us more specifically about it. And I'm really excited to have her on. So when we come back, guys, we will introduce you to Michelle.
Yay.
Welcome, Michelle Sinnott. You are the Director of Captive Animal Law at the PETA Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, please let us know a little bit about what you do over at PETA.
The bulk of my work is I work on issues related to roadside zoos, circuses, really situations where you have wild animals who are being used for entertainment. I live in Alaska. I've been here for about 10 years. And because of that, I work very, very closely with our campaigns department on our efforts against the Iditarod sled dog race.
So I'm just so curious, I have to ask, is Alaska always cold?
Yeah, please let me know. I want to know. I would love to visit Alaska, but I don't like the cold.
Sometimes I mix it up with Antarctica.
Girl.
Very different. Well, we are quite cold at the moment, so don't come now. But if you come up and visit in May, June, July, temperature will be perfect.
Good. Okay. Amazing. So you have been doing amazing actions to raise awareness about the Iditarod. And can you tell us a little bit about different tactics that PETA has taken and maybe actions you have participated in?
Yeah, so PETA has been protesting and going after the Iditarod now for years before I even started working at PETA. In fact, in 1997, The Anchorage Daily News did an expose where they detailed that 107 dogs had died during the race up until that point in time. Since then, about 50 more dogs have perished from causes including aspiration pneumonia, freezing to death, and asphyxiation. And then we amped up our campaign when the documentary Sled Dogs came out, which
Sled
really pulled back the curtain on a lot of shocking abuses happening in the commercial sled dogging industry, including the mass killing of dogs who were not fast enough or fit enough to make the grade, and then the constant chaining of dogs 24/7 in all weather extremes with little to no shelter. So we've been, because of all of that stuff, we started our campaign, we've amped up our campaign, and our tactics include anything from demonstrations. We've done an undercover investigation, some of which you talked about earlier. We've done corporate engagement. We've done celebrity engagement. We have actions that we send out to our members to encourage them to take action themselves. And our work has persuaded several companies to drop their sponsorships of the race, including ExxonMobil, Chrysler, Millennium Hotels and Resorts, Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels. All these companies dropped their sponsorship because of PETA's efforts.
Wow. I mean, you said a lot of big, big, big companies.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that this race was that huge, that people are. Is this televised? Like, is this a televised thing? Like, are people watching it from home and thinking everything is like kumbaya?
It's not like a traditional sporting event where it's televised, because most of the event occurs out in the Alaska wilderness, right? So,
Right.
and that's one of the things that's bad for exposing what happens to the dogs on the trail, because there's
Right.
not cameras or eyes or people who are really paying attention to what's happening. Last year, the winner of the Iditarod was caught on camera dragging visibly exhausted dogs into a checkpoint, and that caused massive public outrage. And I guarantee you that is just one snippet of something that happened that happened to get caught on camera. That's not uncommon. And I'm sure stuff like that happens throughout the trail. We just don't see it because it's in the middle of the wilderness.
So when you talk about this public reaction, is this from people that live outside of Alaska that are really outraged by it and want the industry to end? Or are these actually Alaskans and people that, saw the footage and are like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore?
I think a lot of people in the lower 48, as we as we say here in Alaska, are appalled when they see conditions, in the dog yards, like you were describing, dogs chained, rows of dogs chained, where you're just seeing them circle. That's their life on a 6-foot chain.
So
They're just
sad.
circling. I think for a lot of people, that's very reminiscent of dog yards you would see in dog fighting operations. And so
Right.
I think that triggers a lot of compassion from a lot of people. But I think also, even in Alaska, when the video came out last year showing the winner dragging those dogs, visibly exhausted dogs, into a checkpoint, I think that caused a lot of Alaskans to stop and think, what are we, this is the person that won this race, that what are we supporting? Is this really what we love dogs? Alaskans love dogs. Everybody loves dogs. Why are we continuing to support this sort of thing?
Well, that goes to show you that people need to actually see it to believe that things are going down much, much more dangerously than they were leading us to believe. So you said PETA, what kind of investigations does PETA do? Is it just before the race, like the training process, or is PETA doing investigations during the race now after having that type of footage being released?
Yeah, and that footage is actually captured by the Iditarod. The Iditarod
Of course.
has what they call the Iditarod Insider, which gives, for people who do want to watch it, they can pay a subscription, and that's how that footage was caught. So it's interesting that that footage was caught by the Iditarod itself. The Iditarod did not expose that footage. PETA did. They should have, but they didn't. PETA had an undercover investigator work at two dog kennels of former Iditarod champions, and they found widespread neglect and suffering. I mean, dogs who were denied veterinary care for painful injuries. They were chained to dilapidated boxes and plastic barrels in all weather extremes, and then they were forced to race even when they were exhausted and dehydrated.
I mean, honestly, like, why? Because for me, that doesn't make sense, right? If I want to win this race, okay, and I'm going to get 50K, you would think that they would be taking care of these animals.
They should hire a masseuse for the dogs.
Right. Why do you think this type of abuse is happening with these champions?
So we see this anytime you have an industry that relies on the backs of animals, where they're exploited for financial gain. There's going to be some sort of abuse baked into the system. And then part of keeping that abuse hidden and ensuring that, you know, humans can still profit off that abuse is making sure that the general public doesn't see it. And that goes into this creating this misperception or peddling this false narrative where, you know, these dogs are, they're Alaskan Huskies, they're sled dogs, they're designed for this, they love this, they're well taken care of. I mean, that is the false narrative we see time and time again in industries that abuse animals for money.
Right,
I mean,
but what is the benefit? What would be the benefit for these people who are in charge of the well-being of these dogs? What is the benefit of them to neglect them? If they're supposed to be the best of the best to get them through the race, what is their benefit? Like that's what I'm confused about.
It's money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's expensive. It is expensive to care for 50 dogs, which is, you know, a lot of these big kennels, you know, you've got a team of 16 dogs that starts the Iditarod, but those 16 dogs have been pared down from 50 to 100 plus dogs that have been bred, and they're selectively bred to try to find those dogs who have the best genes to be able to run as far as they do. So you have this system where you've got hundreds of dogs, you're paring them down to 16. It is expensive to feed, care, house, provide veterinary care for those animals. And if there's a dog who is not racing, like Birch, the puppy who suffered a spinal cord injury and was left chained up outside, that dog is not going to make those mushers any money. So there's no financial incentive for them to take care of that animal. And that's what you're seeing when these dogs are not being taken care of.
So
it's a bottom line.
We look at, we're looking at the Iditarod, and this is just one example of dog sledding. Why are we focused on this? Is there a right way to do dog sledding? Can you talk maybe about how this issue extends just past the Iditarod and to other dog sledding races?
Right.
So PETA's goal is to end the Iditarod, which is the longest and most well-known annual dog sled race in the world. And shutting that down would go a long way. It would spare hundreds, if not thousands of dogs from having to run through, treacherous terrain, sub-freezing temperatures with little rest. But stopping the Iditarod would be the first step to stopping other dog sled races that, do similar sorts of things, maybe aren't 1,000 miles, and then that would be the next step would be to stop the commercial dog sledding industry as a whole. So the Iditarod is certainly kind of step one to protecting dogs in the dog sledding industry and making sure it's a thing of the past.
So what would you say to people who visit Alaska or these regions that have dog sledding that isn't the Iditarod, but they want to get that little picture, they want to get that little memory with their significant other, with their children, kind of along what Jamie says, is that better? Is that appropriate? Do we know if those dogs are getting treated better? Like, do we tell people stop going to these companies that offer dog sledding experiences.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Don't do a dog sledding experience. I mean, if you go to a dog yard that does these commercial dog sledding operations, and most of the sled tours that you can find in the winter in areas that have that sort of industry, those mushers are traditionally mushers who are participating in these races. So a lot of the Iditarod mushers do
Their side hustle, kind of.
their side hustle, yeah, to try to bring in extra money, is to do these tours for tourists. And I mean, those dogs, their lives are miserable.
Yeah.
They spend their whole lives chained up outside. Their home is either a dilapidated box or a plastic barrel. They have no companionship. They're denied the ability to even socialize with other dogs. I mean, these dogs, it's a horrible, miserable life. And if you go and pay money to do something like that, you are part of the problem, and you're supporting that industry.
We have a problem with you. So what are solutions or alternatives to dog sledding? So if people want that thrill, they want that excitement, should they use like a snowmobile, or I don't know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so Alaska, one of the reasons I love Alaska is I love adventure, and there is adventure everywhere, and there is human-powered adventure. There's a snow machine race in Alaska. We call them snow machines.
I got you, dogs. I'm ready to race.
Put Justina on the sled.
You won't win at all.
So
I will collapse.
There's snow machine races. There's this really cool race called the Iditarod Invitational, which is human powered. You can run, walk, ski, bike. There's all kinds
That's
of
confusing.
really cool.
Why would they use the same name? I'd be like, what's going on here?
It goes over. It takes the same route as the
Interesting.
Iditarod, so that's why they call it the Iditarod Invitational.
Well, we can do that and spy on them.
Let's sabotage the
Yeah,
route.
we'll spy.
Okay, we'll talk. We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah. I mean,
off
we
air.
won't do that.
Well, that sounds amazing. There's so much adventure and so many other alternatives to harming animals for our own benefit. It's insane.
Right,
It's crazy.
exactly. And I think, the thing I always tell people when they ask, oh, is it okay to go do this, or should I go to this zoo, or is this place okay? I always think it's good for you to stop and check yourself and say, am I going to do this because I want to use this animal for my benefit? I want to see this, or I want to do this. And if so, then you shouldn't do it, because you're exploiting an animal for your own personal gain.
So true.
It is really true.
I like that.
You have to question everything when it comes to animals, and when it organized events or activities surrounding animals.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on. This has been so informative, and I believe we're going to end this Iditarod.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This was great.
Amazing. Thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you. Now knowing more about what's going on, how it's a sport, how it's a secret sport, because there's no evidence of what's going on, it just seems shadier and shadier by the minute.
Yeah, and today, guys, what we learned is that the Iditarod is nothing more but a blood sport, and the human participants in it are motivated by fame and cash prizes, basically.
Right. It's horrible. Don't be like that, and don't contribute to that.
Moral of the story. So thank you guys so much for your support. Please go like, rate, subscribe to this podcast. We want to hear your feedback.
Yes.
Recommend some topics for us.
I'm at Justina. She's at Jamie's Corner.
You don't even know my
Jamie Logan.
bitch.
I know your name. I just don't know which handle.
Dear God, follow me at It's Jamie's Corner.
You know what? I know your name and your soul more than your handle, so that's most important.
Thank you. That's special. And follow PETA, guys, and see more about how you can help and get involved. And you know the drill. We'll be back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back. Whoosh, whoosh.